Crick grinned as he watched the explosions dance before his eyes, slowly pacing back and forth in front of the bridge's viewport. Years ago, he would have been celebrating this type of victory, but it had become all too common for him. The intimidating Deveric mail came to a halt and traced the missiles as they raced through the starry void toward their targets. Not all the missiles were successful, as some of the Crick's prey still had scant defenses. It was no matter, though, as 2 more of their ships, Lancer-class frigates, were torn apart. Finally, his head communications officer reported, "Captain, they've hailed us. They are surrendering." Good, Crick thought. He was getting bored with this hunt. The Tyrthian convoy, a prize target for most pirates, had become nothing more than a minor entertainment for Crick and his men. "Send the boarding parties for their cargo, and do it quickly. I want to be heading back. There are more jobs for us to attend to." He had much to do when he returned to his stronghold. He needed to oversee the spoils of his latest conquest be inventoried and stored properly. He may be one of the most feared pirates in the sector, but that won't always stop his men from trying to sneak a little bonus for themselves. Besides, Crick mused, I deserve a little rest. A nap, something to eat, and of course an extended visit from Sarika and Shini. He smirked to himself as his mind wandered, imagining the lewd acts he would soon be performing with some of his harem. Yes, his thoughts drifting further, after he had eaten, he would call them to begin performing some of his favorites. In particular, he would have Chini start with a long, satisfied... The auditory glands on the sides of Crick's head twitched. Instead of acting, he just grunted and refused to stir from his much-needed rest. His eyes fought to remain closed as the alarm continued to sound. He shifted, lifting his body slightly to adjust himself into a more comfortable position. Damn it, he scowled, his dreams slipping away. Every damn time. This new drive is almost too fast. Can't get a decent rest anymore. Not mention the fucking alarm ruining one of the best dreams he'd had in ages. Crick slammed his fist into the alarm, which only succeeded in knocking the small, seemingly indestructible device to the floor. Finally rising out of his bed, Crick reached down and shut off the alarm. He sat back on his bed, stretching muscles and ligaments that rippled under his light gray armor-like skin. The talons on his feet clacked against the cold metal deck. Still somewhat groggy and irritated at the premature conclusion of his deepest fantasy, he stood and dressed himself. Well, at least we made it here in one piece, Crick thought as he clicked his beak. Crick strode down the hallway towards the cockpit, passing the entrances to the sleeping quarters of his crew. Behind him, the hallway split, going towards the starboard side to the medical bay and port side to the armory. Light reflected brilliantly off of each door and the walls, even though the metallic blue war paint that Crick favored had begun to fade. The floors were spotless, as per Crick's rigid instructions, and each tile gleamed in the harsh chem lights. As he continued, Keek passed the 2 lifts, also meticulously clean, and in arguably good working condition that gave access to the lower decks where the cargo bay, engineering bay, manual defense turrets, and several escape pods were located. As Crick entered the cockpit at the end of the hallway, he glanced out the ship's main viewport. His ship, the graceful Shadow, was long and sleek. It resembled the head of an ancient spear his people used before the sky took to the stars. It was a flattened, pyramid-like vessel, which tapered down to a point as you approached the bow. The cockpit was situated towards the front, with 2 prongs jutting out in front, visible on either side through the viewport and bristling with weapons. Though it was not the fanciest or the most luxurious vessel one could have, it was certainly a formidable ship. It ran efficiently and was well maintained due to Crick's strict orders. It was a ship that most pirates would be proud of. Most. As Crick stood, glaring out into space, not a single detail of his ship or his crew had been able to penetrate the gloomy haze that surrounded his mind. All he could think about was getting a drink, a girl, and a nap. "We're here, Captain," reported Shoak, who was already awake and energetically preparing the ship for its journey further into the system. "Really?" Crick growled internally, asterisk I hadn't noticed. Shock was a Korg, who were known primarily for being fantastic pilots and for their work ethic. They had evolved on a planet that required them to struggle to survive. Faced with fast predators and many treacherous landscapes, the Korg developed fast reflexes and a natural, inborn perseverance. 2 traits that have benefited their race immensely. Shotak's work ethic was a source of pride for him, and like most of his kind, it made Shotak quite the morning person. So naturally, Creek hated him for it. How far out are we? Crick yawned. Not far, only about a 3-hour trip in system. That'll give us plenty of time to load the shuttles. Good. I'll get the landing crew ready. Sir, can I ask you something? You just did. Crick glanced at Shotak and momentarily enjoyed the glare he was receiving. Fine, whatever. Just make it quick. Are you sure coming here was a good idea? I know we need a new place to stay after the Council's peacekeepers overran our last base, but it's not like this system is all that much better. We're pretty isolated, except for the fact that we're pretty close to Vroshan territory. If those bloodthirsty beasts found us, we wouldn't exactly have anywhere to run. Showik's voice trailed off. This system is so empty that the Vroshans would never feel the need to come here. They're always looking to fight battles that will bring them honor through victory or through death. Those dumbasses love a battle on a galactic scale. They're not going to worry about a random group of pirates looking to set up shop, Crick replied. The only group we'll have to look out for in this system is the Order. The Order? Why would they come here? Aren't they supposed to stay and guard the ruins of the Scourge or something? Exactly. This system is just inside the borders of what used to be the Scourge's inner territory. And that's a good thing? It's been almost 5,000 standard cycles since the Great War ended and the Scourge was erased from the galaxy. It's not like they're actually going to be a threat to us. It just means that the Order will probably poke around every once in a while. Honestly, though, it's a perfect hiding place. The Vroshans, the Order, and the lingering fear of the Scourge. No one in their right minds would come here. Interesting choice of words, Captain. Crick's eyes narrowed at the pilot. Oh, I wouldn't get cheeky with me if I were you. My apologies. Shodik rolled his eyes. I'll focus on our approach. Good, I need a drink, Crick thought as he turned and left the cockpit. Tannen eyed himself in his mirror as he finished latching the pieces of his armor together. The deep green coloring glimmered in the light that poured through his window. The green color that he had been working his whole life to earn. The color he had wished to wear since he was an infant, barely able to walk without his mother's help. It was the color his father had worn, and his father's father before him. The men of his family had worn it with pride and honor for generations as they served at their posts. Guardians whose lives were dedicated to ensuring the galaxy's worst nightmare never returned. He straightened, looking himself up and down in his full armor, save the helmet. He turned his body from side to side, watching as the morning sun flashed against his suit's metallic surface. The moment he had been waiting his whole life for was nearly upon him. And yet, he felt no different. The pride Tannen believed he would feel never materialized, at least not to the level that he had expected. Tannen knew the exact reason for this, however. As much as he had been waiting for this day, for the day that he would truly become a man in the eyes of his father, he couldn't help but wonder why it was necessary that anyone had to remain here. 4,892 cycles, Tannen thought. 4,892 cycles, and my people still fear ghosts. 4,892 cycles, and the greatest members of my people are still stuck on these barren, lifeless worlds, guarding against the Scourge's return. Tannen looked out the viewport into the void that lay beyond. He had lived the majority of his life surrounded by the blackness in which his home, Remembrance, was suspended. He had set foot on many worlds, yet he had never been able to call them home. His people's home had been laid waste too long ago, at the end of the war. Millions had perished, and his people had never tried to settle anywhere new. While they had military outposts in all the systems they guarded, very few civilians lived outside of their many colony stations. There was a small station maintained near their old world, at which his people could pay their respects to those who sacrificed everything. Tannen had only made the trip once, as it was far from the Remembrance, but he planned to go more often when he had the opportunity. He sighed, returning to the moment at hand. He always felt guilty when he had such thoughts. It didn't do justice to everything his people had given up to ensure that the surviving species and all those who came after them would never have to endure the same fate. It was a little late now to be second-guessing himself anyway. The ceremony in which he and his fellow neophytes were to become full guardians was to begin later in the day. After he took his vows, there was no going back. Abandoning one's post, abandoning the order, not only was punishable by immediate death, but it would bring unimaginable shame upon the deserter's family. Well, time to begin the galaxy's most boring profession, Tannen thought, as he resigned himself to his fate. Let's just get this over with. Tannen heard the door to his room open behind him. In the mirror, he saw his father stride into the room, eyes shining with pride at the sight of him. Tannen, your day is finally here. Today you take your first steps as a man. The giant Tannen had for a father beamed at him with pride. Tannen himself was a tall, muscular individual, but even he could not match up to the behemoth that had helped raise him. It was only fitting, as his father not only towered over the rest in size, but in status as well. Honored for his strength, his intelligence, and most of all, his devotion to the Order, Tannen's father, Karnan, had easily achieved the rank of Archaeon. An Archaeon had the ability to exert quite a bit of influence within the Order and with the people. Karnan was so well respected that many were sure he would soon become a pillar, one who served the Great Protector directly. All things considered, Karnan was one of the most powerful and influential people in the entire Order. Come now, your friends are waiting for you to join them. Karnan smiled at his son. The ceremony will be beginning soon. Karnan smiled as he watched as his son walk out of the room. He couldn't help but feel pride seeing Tannen don the green of the Order for the first time. It took him back to his own days as a new guardian, a somewhat rough time for everyone who joined. Once the boy had left the room, Karnan allowed a bit of a frown onto his face. He also knew that his son was having mixed feelings over becoming a guardian, as many neophytes do. Usually it's nothing but nerves acting up at the last minute, but sometimes he worried about his son. If the boy was going to properly handle his upcoming responsibilities and live up to his family's name, he was going to need to steel himself from such dishonorable thoughts. Even after having him look upon the ashes of Doran with his own eyes, he didn't seem to understand the importance of the Order. Karnan sighed. They had to ensure that no one ever needed to make the sacrifices that the people had. Maybe if he could see the power of the Scourge firsthand. Maybe that will help. Very few were allowed into the actual ruins on the core worlds. It would be unwise to have someone of weak constitution explore the remains of the Scourge. The only groups allowed into the ruins regularly were the Ghosts, guardians of the highest honor who were handpicked by Krosin, the Pillar of Shadows, and a very exclusive team of scientists who have been slowly studying what had been left by the Scourge. Occasionally, however, someone with the influence of an Archaeon was able to ensure that others observed the depths of the ruins should it be necessary.